Hey, it's Danny from projectmanaverse.com, and in this video, I'm going to share with you 6 planning mistakes that project managers make. So let's jump into the video. First of all, what is a project plan? You need to understand this as a project manager, of course. Basically, a project plan is a list of all the activities that need to be done in order to go live with your project and achieve all the outcomes you are looking to deliver. And those activities are ordered in sequence that they need to happen in, and you need to have a start date and an end date and basically the duration of those tasks. So that's what your project plan is in a high level nutshell. And it's really important for a project manager for several reasons. It's a project manager's number one tool. You must have your project plan because obviously it tells you what you need to do next in the coming weeks and the whole year. But the project plan has subtle benefits as well, maybe hidden benefits. Number one is it gives yourself confidence and your team confidence that what you're doing is achievable, that your project targets and goals are actually going to happen. Because without a plan, you're just moving along and hoping things are going to work out by your deadline. But if you have a concrete plan, very detailed, you just know that if you stick to this plan, you will achieve your outcomes. You might have to mitigate a few risks along the way and recover some slip milestones. But essentially, as long as you stick to that plan, your project will succeed. So it will give yourself confidence so you can sleep at night as a project manager, and it will give your team confidence as well. And with a team that is confident, you get more motivation and you get more commitment and delivery to the project. So it's really good in that sense. It's also very good for things like prioritizing and seeing the wood for the trees and communication. But trust me, project plan is a PM's number one tool. So when it comes to planning and creating this product, there are certain mistakes that I've seen project managers make along the way, and they continue to make them. And I'm going to go through those now so you can avoid making them yourself because they are very important. So, number one is project managers sometimes don't do right to left planning. They only do left to right. Sorry, the other way around. They don't do left to right planning. They only do right to left planning. So, what do I mean by right to left and left to right planning? Well, what usually happens in the project world, especially in the IT world, is you'll understand the project. Someone will give you the project scope and the outcome to you as a project manager and say, deliver this for me, but we have to deliver it by September. Otherwise, X, Y, and Z will happen. We'll get fined, or we won't have the resources in place, or whatever. So they usually set you a deadline. So what the project manager will usually do is they'll plan for that deadline. They'll look at the deadline and they'll work backwards and think, right, what needs to get done in order to achieve that go live date? And that makes sense, right? There's nothing wrong with doing that. But what you do by that, you're kind of shoehorning activity into a predefined duration of time. What you really want to do before you do that is really understand how long is a project going to take if you plan this properly. So what I do is when I start a project plan, I forget the go live date, the one that I've been given, and I start from the beginning and I start from the left to say, right, what do we need to do? And plan all those things one by one until we reach the end date, the realistic end date, and see what it is. And it could be that it's actually it's before the deadline we've been given. It could be 5 months after, but at least that way you're seeing what the realistic plan is and you have that in your back pocket. Now, if you need to bring that deadline forward, then you can start doing the activities to look for synergies and do parallel work or add more resource to try and meet that deadline you've been given, but at least you know the realistic picture. And if you really can't do it, now you can tell your stakeholders, look, we've done planning and realistically it's going to take this long. We can't meet this deadline. We can certainly try, we can go ahead for it and do our best, but there's a huge risk we're not going to make it because we don't have a viable plan to get there. So make sure you do that left to right planning, that realistic planning, before you do your right to left planning. Okay, common mistake number 2 is you project managers plan in too little testing time. So as an IT project manager, you're going to have a phase of your project where you're testing the software or the application or the IT infrastructure that you have changed or built from scratch. And testing always takes longer than you think, and you really need to plan it carefully and make sure you give yourself plenty of time because there are so many unforeseen issues in testing. Like the environment can go down, for example. If that happens, you could lose a week trying to get it back up. So you've lost a week of solid testing just like that. So you need to make sure that you're being realistic and add contingency into your testing time frame, because that is a phase of the project where most issues usually occur and you get most delays. So make sure you're giving yourself a chance by giving yourself a good chunk of testing. Obviously, every project is unique and you have to look at it case by case, but don't be pressured into trying to get testing done in a small window. You need to give yourself plenty of time to test the product. Okay, number three is that project managers don't plan for any operational acceptance testing. So never mind not giving yourself enough time. This phase of testing, most project managers don't even plan for at all. So what is operational acceptance testing? This is almost like the last stage of testing. So once you've built your product, you test it in the system test environments, you do lower testing environments, then you might want to do some performance testing, then you do your UAT, your end user testing, where the users are going to start playing with it. And once that's all done, what you want to do now is try and replicate how this software or application would be used in the real world, in real life operations. And you want to stick to all the service level agreements and deadlines that would be in the operating live world. So you want to replicate the live environment as much as possible in terms of procedures and timelines and deadlines, and make sure you can actually meet all those timelines and deadlines. So you're replicating a schedule that you're going to use in production. Now, a lot of project managers don't plan for that, and that's very risky because you could test your product and it could work fine from an end user perspective or looks good. But when you actually try and use it in the real world, you can find that things aren't quite working correctly or fast enough, or data transfers aren't happening quick enough, or processing isn't happening quick enough, or using the applications in conjunction with your business as usual processes doesn't go together, doesn't marry up. So you want to make sure you have that in place so you're very confident when you turn it on and you lose it in the live environment for the first time, you're going to be able to meet all your SLAs or service level agreements and complete all your monthly processes as you would do in the real world. Okay, the next common mistake is project managers don't plan a contingency go live date. So when you plan your project, you'll have usually one go live date, the big one. There might be a few phased implementations ahead of that, but usually there'll be a big bang go live date at the end of the project where you put everything, the majority of your code live and you turn it on. Now, what you want to do is make sure you have a backup plan in case that go live fails, because sometimes it can fail. You might have to try and back out the code and try again another time. So if that happens, you want to make sure you've got a plan B ready, because go live dates are quite difficult to agree sometimes, especially if it's a big organization and you've got lots of governance behind it. So you want to make sure that secondary go live date, that backup plan, is already in your project plan. So if the first one fails, then you know what you're going to do next, and you don't have to scramble around trying to find out the next steps. That way as well, you can cost for it and you know how much it's going to cost if you have to follow that plan B. Okay, common mistake number 5 is project managers don't validate the assumptions they make during the planning process. So when you make a plan, often you won't know all the facts up front and you have to make some assumptions in your planning. You might have to assume certain things are going to be in place, or certain resources are going to be there, or certain things are going to happen in order to do something at a certain time in your project plan. So you're kind of making assumptions at the start of the project. Now, sometimes you can forget about those assumptions and just carry on with the plan and not go out and proactively try and validate the assumptions to make sure those assumptions were actually true. Because if they're not true and you come to that piece of work that you'd made assumptions about, then you're going to be stuck. You won't be able to do it, and it's going to cause a lot of problems. So what you want to do is make sure you document all those assumptions during your planning workshop and then put them in a tracker. Then as soon as you can, get them validated and test them and make sure you can tick them, say, yep, that assumption is actually just a fact. Now we don't have to assume anything anymore. The quicker you can do that, the better. Sometimes it will take a few weeks, sometimes a few months, but do it as soon as possible. Common mistake number 6 is project managers don't get approval for their project plan from all the stakeholders that need to approve it. Because you can create a great project plan, it looks good, it looks like it's going to work, and it probably would work, but you need to make sure that every single person that is involved in delivering something on that plan, and also all key stakeholders that have power over that plan or are impacted by that plan, are signing that plan off. Because if they don't, then your plan isn't really worth the paper it's written on, because it can be it can be derailed by just one stakeholder. So make sure when you're doing that planning process and you've got your draft, send it round to all those key stakeholders, identify them with your team, talk to your business leads and your sponsor group to figure out who needs to sign it off. But make sure it's all being signed off by all those key stakeholders, and then you can baseline it. We say baseline it is when it's kind of governed and we get the final tick on it. And then if any changes need to happen to that plan, you can raise a change request and go through the correct governance to change it. Otherwise, it's locked in and you're ready to go and you have confidence that everyone has signed up to that project plan. Okay, I went a little bit over time there, but I'm sure that was useful for you. If you enjoyed it, give it a thumbs up. And until the next time, please take care.